The cabin door creaked open against the howling December wind of 1872. Samuel Garrett, a man who hadn't touched a woman in 8 long years, found himself face to face with 3 Apache women, soaked to the bone, shivering, their dark eyes gleaming with desperation, and something else he couldn't name. Behind them, the Arizona Territory stretched endless and unforgiving. Ahead lay his tiny cabin, barely 16 by 20 feet. 1 room, 1 bed, and outside, the kind of blizzard that could kill a man in minutes. Sam's weathered hands gripped the doorframe as he stared at Ayanna, the eldest, her wet buckskin dress clinging to every curve. Her proud chin lifted despite the cold that turned her lips blue. Her sisters, Itzel and young Nayeli, pressed close behind her, their bodies trembling, not just from the storm. "Please," Ayanna whispered in broken English, her breath forming clouds between them. "We die out here." Sam had spent 8 years avoiding women, honoring his dead wife's memory. Now 3 stood at his threshold, asking for sanctuary in the most dangerous territory in America. What would a man do when his principles collide with desire? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the wild frontier. 3 days earlier, Sam Garrett had been splitting wood behind his ranch, 20 miles east of Prescott, when the first snow began to fall. At 42, he moved with the deliberate precision of a man who'd learned that survival meant paying attention to details. Every swing of his axe was calculated, every stack of cordwood measured against the harsh Arizona winter ahead. His neighbors called him the Hermit of Tonto Basin, not out of cruelty, but concern. 8 years was too long for any man to grieve, they whispered. Too long to wear a wedding ring for a woman buried under 6 feet of territory dirt. But Sam remembered Sarah's last words, "Promise me you'll love me forever." And he had. Lord help him, he had. The cabin he'd built for their future still held traces of her presence. The rocking chair she'd wanted positioned just so by the window. The blue-flowered plates they'd bought in Prescott for their first anniversary. The photograph on the mantel, Sarah in her wedding dress, smiling that smile that had convinced a Civil War veteran to trade his wandering boots for a settler's plow. Every night, Sam would trace the gold band on his finger and remember the way she'd hum while cooking, how she'd curl against him during thunderstorms, the sound she made when, no. Some memories were too sacred to revisit, even in the privacy of his own mind. The territory had a way of testing a man's resolve. Apache raids kept most settlers clustered around Prescott and Tucson, but Sam stayed put, tending his small herd of cattle, living off jerky and beans, speaking to no one except the preacher who rode circuit twice a month. "Sam," Reverend Mackenzie had said just last Sunday, "isolation ain't the same as devotion. Sarah wouldn't want you dried up like old leather." But what did the preacher know? He'd never held a dying woman in his arms, never promised to love her forever, and meant it with every breath in his body. Now, 3 days later, as the blizzard raged outside his windows with unusual December fury, Sam understood that some promises were about to be tested. The knock came just after midnight, soft, desperate, almost lost in the wind's howl. Sam reached for his Colt out of pure instinct. Indians didn't knock. Neither did white men with honest business. Through the frosted window, he glimpsed movement. 3 figures huddled against his door, like refugees from hell itself. Sam's hand hesitated on the latch. 8 years of careful solitude hung in the balance. 8 years of faithful mourning. 8 years of keeping his promise to a dead woman. The knock came again, weaker this time, and Sam Garrett, who'd spent nearly a decade avoiding temptation, opened the door to the 3 most beautiful women he'd ever seen. They stumbled inside, like creatures from a fever dream. 3 Apache women who moved with the fluid grace of their people despite exhaustion that ran bone deep. The eldest, Ayanna, carried herself with unmistakable authority even as her wet buckskin dress revealed the feminine curves beneath. Her sisters flanked her like protective shadows. "We are daughters of Cochise's cousin," Ayanna said, her English halting but determined. "Soldiers come to reservation. Say we go to New Mexico Place. We say no. We run." Sam knew the story without hearing it. Since the Camp Grant massacre the year before, the Army had been relocating Apache families, splitting them apart, scattering them across reservations like seeds in barren soil. Itzel, the middle sister, swayed on her feet. Even soaked and shivering, she possessed an ethereal beauty. High cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to hold ancient mysteries, and something in her bearing that spoke of healing hands and a gentle spirit. "She's sick," Ayanna gestured toward Itzel. "Need warm, need safe place." The youngest, Nayeli, couldn't have been more than 20. Where her sisters carried the weight of tragedy, she retained something vibrant and curious. Her gaze wandered around the cabin, taking in details. The woman's photograph on the mantel, the wedding ring on Sam's finger, the carefully maintained evidence of a man still in mourning. "Your woman very beautiful," Nayeli said softly, nodding toward Sarah's portrait. Sam's throat tightened. "She was," Ayanna repeated, understanding flooding her dark eyes. "You understand loss." For a moment, the cabin fell silent except for the wind rattling the windows and the fire crackling in the stone hearth. 3 Apache women who'd lost their family. 1 white man who'd lost his reason for living. "You can't stay long," Sam heard himself saying, even as he began pulling blankets from his chest. "Cavalry patrols come through. If they find you here—" "We know danger," Ayanna said. "For you too." That was the moment Sam realized the choice had already been made. Not by logic or strategy, but by something deeper. The same instinct that had made him hold Sarah's hand during her final fever. The same stubborn honor that had kept him faithful to her memory. He handed Ayanna the thickest blanket. "Take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire." "We no take your bed," Itzel protested, but her words were undermined by another violent shiver. "You'll take it, and that's final." Sam turned his back to give them privacy as they began peeling off wet clothing. "There's food in the larder, coffee on the stove. Make yourselves comfortable." The last word caught in his throat. Comfortable. In his cabin. 3 beautiful women who were trusting him with their lives, and he was trusting them with something else entirely. As he arranged his bedroll near the hearth, Sam caught glimpses of graceful silhouettes moving behind him. The soft rustle of wet buckskin being replaced by his spare blankets. The whispered Apache words between sisters. 8 years of celibate isolation. 1 small cabin. 1 long winter ahead. What could possibly go wrong? By the 3rd day, the storm had settled into the kind of relentless winter fury that could trap a man for weeks. Sam had seen it before. Blizzards that transformed the Arizona high country into something resembling the Arctic, where a mistake in judgment could cost everything. The cabin had taken on a rhythm unlike anything he'd experienced since Sarah's death. Itzel, recovering from her fever, moved through the small space with quiet efficiency, somehow making his bachelor supplies stretch into proper meals. Her gentle hands had a way of turning jerky and beans into something that actually tasted like food. Nayeli, true to her curious nature, had appointed herself his cultural ambassador. She'd found his razor and mimed elaborate questions about white man's grooming habits. Her laughter, the first genuine laughter the cabin had heard in 8 years, filled corners that had grown too accustomed to silence. But it was Ayanna who unsettled him most. She watched him with those dark eyes that missed nothing, the way he carefully avoided looking when her sisters moved around the cabin, how his hands shook slightly when Itzel had tended a small cut on his knuckle, her fingers warm and impossibly gentle against his skin. The fact that he still wore his wedding ring like armor against temptation. "You good man," she said on the third evening, after Nayeli and Itzel had fallen asleep, curled together on his bed. "But you carry too much weight here." She pressed her hand to her chest, over her heart. Sam stared into the fire, trying not to notice how the blanket had slipped slightly off Ayanna's shoulder, revealing smooth skin that seemed to glow in the firelight. "Some weights can't be put down. My grandmother say different. She say heart like river. When you dam it up, water find other way. Sometimes destroy everything in path. And sometimes rivers dry up altogether." Ayanna moved closer, settling beside him near the fire, close enough that he could smell her hair, which Itzel had washed and braided with some kind of sweet-scented oil, close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "You think your woman wants you to dry up? Become empty man?" The question hit like a physical blow. Sam's hand went instinctively to his wedding ring, turning it around his finger in the old nervous habit. "I made a promise. Promise to love her forever. Yes. But promise to stop living." Ayanna's voice was gentle, but her words cut deep. "She in picture there, she look like woman who want her man to shrivel up like old corn?" Sam couldn't look at Sarah's photograph. Couldn't bear to see that radiant smile and imagine what she might think of this situation. 3 Apache women sharing his cabin, sharing his fire, slowly thawing something in him that he'd thought was frozen beyond repair. "It's complicated," he managed. "No complicated." Nayeli's voice came from the bed, sleepy but certain. "In our tribe, when good man lose woman, tribal mothers find him new woman. Life too hard for man alone." "Nayeli," Ayanna warned. "What?" "Is true. White men make everything, how you say, difficult. Simple things become like wrestling with bear." Itzel's soft laugh joined her younger sisters. "She right, though. You fight too hard against what heart want." Sam found himself surrounded by their gentle conspiracy. 3 women who'd somehow made his tiny cabin feel less like a shrine to the dead and more like a home for the living. Outside, the wind howled with renewed fury. Inside, something else was stirring, something Sam had thought buried with his wife. On the morning of the 8th day, the crack of distant gunfire shattered the cabin's fragile peace. Sam bolted upright from his bedroll, instantly alert with the instincts of a man who'd survived both war and wilderness. Through the frost-covered window, he spotted the telltale smoke signals rising from the valley below, the Army's method of coordinating search parties. "They come," Ayanna whispered, already gathering her sisters. In minutes, the 3 women had transformed from his gentle house guests back into hunted fugitives, their eyes sharp with the kind of fear that kept people alive in hostile territory. "Cellar," Sam said curtly, pulling up the hidden trapdoor he'd built beneath his kitchen floorboards. "Stay quiet, no matter what you hear." As his guests disappeared into the root cellar, Sam quickly erased evidence of their presence. Extra blankets vanished. Dishes were reduced to what one man might use. The sweet scent that had lingered in the cabin was masked by deliberately burned coffee. The riders appeared 20 minutes later, 6 cavalry troopers led by Sergeant Murphy, a red-faced Irishman whom Sam recognized from his infrequent trips to Prescott. "Morning, Garrett," Murphy called, dismounting with the stiff movements of a man who'd been in the saddle too long. "Mind if we come in?" Coffee smells good. Course. Sam stepped aside, his face revealing nothing. Rough weather for patrol work. Rougher work than weather. Murphy stomped snow from his boots, his eyes already scanning the cabin's interior. Got 3 Apache women gone missing from the reservation. Considered dangerous. Dangerous how? Sam poured coffee with steady hands, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The kind that gets white men killed for helping them. Murphy's gaze lingered on the neat stack of blankets, the carefully arranged furniture. You seen anything unusual? Tracks? Smoke? Sometimes these reservation jumpers hole up in abandoned cabins. Below the floorboards, Sam knew 3 women were holding their breath, trusting their lives to his ability to lie convincingly to a man with the authority to hang him for harboring fugitives. Haven't seen Soul for weeks, Sam said, offering the sergeant a cup. Storm's been too fierce for traveling. Murphy accepted the coffee, but his pale eyes continued their methodical inventory. He paused at Sarah's photograph on the mantel, his expression softening slightly. That's right. You're the widower. Heard about your loss. Terrible thing losing a woman out here. Yes, Sam agreed quietly. Terrible thing. Makes a man appreciate what he's got, I suppose. Law, order, civilization. Murphy set down his cup, his meaning unmistakable. These Apache women. They're not like white women, Garrett. They're different. Seductive in ways that can destroy a man's judgment. Sam met the sergeant's stare directly. I wouldn't know about that. Course not. You're a God-fearing man. Union veteran, isn't that right? That's right. Murphy's smile had no warmth. Then you understand duty. Country over personal inclinations. The silence stretched between them, loaded with unspoken threats. Below, the floorboards seemed to pulse with the hidden presence of the women Sam was protecting, women whose lives depended on his next words. Sergeant, Sam said finally, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd once commanded soldiers in battle. I've been fighting for this country since before you put on that uniform. Don't lecture me about duty. Murphy's face flushed, but he stepped back. No offense intended. Just doing my job. Then do it. But do it off my land. After the cavalry departed, Sam waited a full hour before opening the cellar door. 3 pairs of dark eyes looked up at him from the shadows below, and he realized that something fundamental had changed. He was no longer just sheltering refugees. He was choosing sides in a war that had been raging since he first arrived in Arizona territory. And for the first time in 8 years, Sam Garrett felt truly alive. That evening, as wind rattled the cabin walls with fresh fury, the atmosphere inside had transformed into something electric and dangerous. The cavalry's visit had stripped away pretenses, leaving raw truth in its wake. Sam sat cleaning his rifle, not from necessity, but from the need to keep his hands busy, while 3 beautiful women moved around his cabin with newfound intimacy. They'd seen him risk everything to protect them. The knowledge hung in the air like smoke from the fire. You could have given us up, Ayanna said, settling beside him with the fluid grace that had haunted his dreams for a week. Would have been safer for you. Wouldn't have been right. Right. She tested the English word like she was tasting something new. White man's word, like honor, yes? Like honor. Itzel approached from the kitchen area, carrying 2 cups of coffee. In the firelight, her beauty struck him anew. The elegant line of her throat, the way her dark hair caught golden highlights, the gentle sway of her hips as she moved. When she handed him the cup, her fingers lingered against his longer than necessary. Your hands shake, she observed quietly. They did. Had been shaking since the moment he'd lied to Murphy, since the moment he'd chosen these women over his own safety. "You're a beautiful woman, Eitzel," he admitted, his voice rough. "All of you are beautiful. And I'm lonely," Nayeli finished from the bed, where she sat braiding her hair. "Very lonely. We see it in your eyes." Sam's gaze went instinctively to Sarah's photograph, but Ayanna gently turned his chin back toward her. "She gone, Sam. We here now." The simple words shattered something inside him, a dam that had held back 8 years of grief, desire, and desperate human need. His wedding ring felt suddenly heavy, like a chain rather than a promise. "I don't know how," he whispered. "How what?" "How to this. How to want someone else. How to touch someone who isn't—" His voice broke. Itzel moved closer, her coffee forgotten. With infinite gentleness, she placed her palm against his chest, over his heart. "Feel how it beats fast. That not for dead women, that for living ones." "In our tribe," Nayeli said softly, "when winter come, we share warmth to survive." "Is natural thing. Beautiful thing." Ayanna's hand found his, her thumb tracing the wedding band that had become his refuge and his prison. "She want you to live, Sam. Not just survive. Live." The ring slipped off easier than he'd expected, as if 8 years of faithful wear had loosened its hold. With trembling fingers, Sam placed it carefully beside Sarah's photograph, not discarding it, but setting it aside like a prayer, offered and answered. When he turned back, 3 women were watching him with expressions that mingled compassion with unmistakable desire. The firelight painted their skin in shades of gold and amber. Blankets had shifted to reveal graceful curves, the rise and fall of breath, the pulse points at throats and wrists that seemed to beckon. "I haven't," Sam started, then stopped. Some confessions were too vulnerable for words. "We know," Ayanna said, rising with fluid motion to stand before him. Her hands went to the ties of her borrowed shirt. His shirt, he realized, seeing how it draped over her feminine form. "We teach you to remember." What followed was a awakening more profound than Sam had thought possible. 3 women, each bringing their own gift to the healing of a man who'd forgotten how to live. Ayanna, strong and sure, guided him with the authority of someone who understood that leadership sometimes meant showing others how to surrender. Itzel, gentle as her name suggested, offered touches that seemed to draw poison from old wounds, replacing pain with something clean and new. And Nayeli, youngest but perhaps wisest, brought joy to the sacred act, laughter that transformed intimacy from desperate need into celebration. In the flickering firelight, surrounded by warmth and acceptance, Sam Garrett finally understood what his grandmother had meant when she told him, decades ago, that the human heart was big enough to hold all kinds of love. He wept as they loved him back to life, 8 years of tears falling like rain on desert ground. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the cruel clarity that storms always end and refuges are temporary things. The 3 sisters stood in his doorway as they had that first night, but everything was different now. They wore the clothes they'd arrived in, dried and mended. Their hair was braided for travel. Their eyes held the knowledge of a man transformed. "Mexico," Ayanna said simply. "We have family there. Safe." Sam nodded, not trusting his voice. On the mantel, Sarah's photograph sat beside his wedding ring, not abandoned, but joined by something new. A beaded bracelet Itzel had woven from materials in his cabin, a symbol that love could coexist with memory. "You will be happy now?" Nayeli asked, her young face serious. "I'll try," Sam promised. "Try not enough," Ayanna corrected, but she was smiling. You will be happy. Heart knows truth now. They walked into the morning light that turned the snow-covered territory into something magnificent and terrible. At the ridgeline, they paused and turned back once. 3 silhouettes against the vast sky, already becoming part of legend. Sam stood in his doorway until they disappeared, then went inside to stoke the fire that would warm him through whatever winters lay ahead. 6 months later, a letter arrived from Mexico, awkward English script carrying news of marriages and babies and a boy named Samuel. Sam smiled as he read it, then carefully placed it in the box beside Sarah's photograph and his wedding ring. Some stories end in tragedy, others in triumph. The best ones, perhaps, end in transformation. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Arizona Territory, where men discovered that the heart's frontier is vaster than any wilderness. If this story moved you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe for more tales from the American frontier. And remember, sometimes salvation comes not from solitude, but from the courage to open your door to strangers in the storm.